Hello and welcome to the Turn Four Podcast. I am your host, Dan Maldonado. If this is your first time listening, welcome. If you're a regular listener, welcome back. Join me in welcoming back a familiar face and voice to the show, my longtime co-host and co-founder of this here podcast, Timmy. What's up, Timmy?
What's going on, Dan?
How are you?
I'm awesome. How are you today?
Doing well, thank you. Welcome back to Turn Four, Tim. Welcome
Thanks for
home.
having me. I appreciate it. It's so good to be back.
It's good to be home, Timmy. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's been a little while, but here I am in the flesh, drinking coffee as you do.
Yes.
And ready to.
Are you drinking coffee there? That's not water?
It's coffee. I should have a water too, but
is that today's coffee or is it like yesterday's coffee?
It's today's coffee.
I'm so
Today
proud.
was a special day. Every other day, fresh coffee. Every other day, stale coffee. But that's okay. As long as you put it in the microwave, it heats up. It's just fine.
Yeah, for our dear listeners who don't remember this story, Tim brews a pot of coffee every other day, warms up what's left in the microwave and enjoys it that way.
Well, you got to have something to look forward to some days.
You sure do.
Yeah.
I'm going to work till 80 and you'll be retired in your mid-50s. So that's what it, because I brew a pot of coffee every day.
Yeah,
yep.
Exactly. Cost savings, for sure.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So we're here for the 108th.
Timmy, 100 episode of the Turn Four Podcast, where we'll celebrate the 108th Indy 500.
Turn to century. The show is Turn to century.
Can you believe it?
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, it's one of those things that, when we first started this, it was, how did we get to 3 years and what does it look like and how many episodes? And I don't think we ever thought we'd get this far, but
3 years was the plan, right? Was the original plan.
Yeah. Which
3 years will be
coming up here.
Road America, yeah, which will end up being our last episode.
That's what I hear.
We're doing the final three together, you and I, Indy, Detroit, and Road America, and then we're going to sign off. And who knows what happens after that? But
I was going to say it's going to turn into something, right? It's not going to be forever.
Maybe
we'll see.
We'll see what happens. But it is good to have you back for the 100th.
I'm happy
episode.
to be back. So hopefully we have a great show and the listeners enjoy it. And we'll see what happens with the next two as well. So it'll be good.
Yeah.
So sorry to those that were glad I was gone. I'm back for a couple, so you have to bear with me for a little bit. So
I got to thank Brian, who was chipping in as the co-host here in your absence. He did a great job and was incredibly brave. I guess that's the only way I could say it. I mean, he just reached out on Instagram, just out of the blue, and said, "Hey, if you need somebody, I'll chip in." And he did a great job, and took to it very well. I think Brian did real well with it, and I was happy to have him there. And I did it a couple of times on my own, and then baby girl helped me out with one of the episodes as well. So it's been pretty
Brian
good.
Was
but
pretty insightful, sure. Right, coming all the way from the West Coast is my understanding, and been a long time IndyCar fan, so he's seen a lot. And I think he was at Long Beach, right? So you guys did a Long Beach story that was really good too. So good job. Yeah.
Before we get into this, we're just going to hit the subplots first before we get into like the winners and the winning teams and some of those things. So we're going to talk about,
like it's a subplot kind of show, like
doesn't it? Oh, there we go with the thing.
Like race, right? Because it feels appropriate. So I think you did really good on how this is going to lay out here.
Thank you. But before we get into it though, one of our favorite segments, according to the listeners and the feedback from the listeners, was trivia time with Timmy.
I should have known something was up.
We've got a little bit of trivia for you, Timmy. Are you ready?
I did some research before the show, so let's see if I do anything.
I love it
right here. All right, let's do it.
Tim, how many drivers have won back-to-back Indy 500s? 2, 4, 6, or 10?
4.
Wrong. 6. That would be.
When you threw in 10, I thought it might be 6, but I was already set on 4. But even before you gave me the choices, I should pay attention a little more. All right, who are
Wilbur
they?
Wilbur Shaw, Maury Rose, Bill Vukovich, and Al Unser. Long time ago, Tim. Elio Castroneves is, of course, we know, and then this past weekend, Joseph Newgarden joins that group. Timmy, what engine manufacturer has more Indy 500 wins? Chevy or Honda?
I'm gonna have to go with Chevy.
Wrong. Chevy has 13 wins. Honda has 15. And the Offenhauser actually has more than anybody. It's in the 20s, but I wanted to just give you the recents on this one between Honda and Chevy. Honda makes sense, right? Because they were the only supplier for a while.
Yeah, well, I guess so. I guess I should have. Here's why I don't belong on the show. I don't know my trivia. All right, next, let's go. I got to get one of these right. How many more are there?
One. Who has led more laps at Indianapolis Motor Speedway? Scott Dixon, Elio Castroneves, or Dario Franchitti?
Can I get the choices again?
Dixon, Elio Castroneves, or Dario Franchitti?
Dixon.
Correct.
Yeah, there you go.
Actually, by far, compared to the other two choices that I gave you, 677 laps led for Dixon to Franchitti's 329, Castroneves at 326. Actually, number 2 on that list is Al Unser Sr. with 644. So, rare company. Good job, Tim. You got a 33%.
Okay. 33. That's the failing, but that's okay.
It's all right. What does your mug say?
Let's just
remind you here. What is the mug say?
Oh, it says it's official. You're awesome, and I don't know if it's talking about me or you.
Even with 1 out of 3, you're still awesome. Good job, Timmy.
I just keep telling myself if something goes wrong, just look at your cup and move on, even if it's 1 day old coffee. I do have a trivia question for you. Since 1996, Dan.
Oh.
What's the average number of cautions for the Indianapolis 500? Average number. Your options are 6, 8, or 10.
It's 8.
Very good. It's really 8.1, but we'll say you're correct because you didn't have a choice. And how many cautions were there in this year's event?
I have this.
It was the average.
Oh, it was 47 laps and it was 8 cautions. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
everything was going to as planned, I guess.
Right on average.
Even though it felt very caution heavy in the beginning of the race, it did sort of pan out.
Yeah, it did finally pick up. So, as you said, it was certainly a race of subplots. I think moving into the subplots, let's talk. Tim, let's talk rookies. I'm gonna go in reverse order. 31st for Tom Blomqvist in his first Indianapolis 500. Hence the fact that he's a rookie. He crashed out. I think he's credited with 0 laps in the 108th running of the Indianapolis 500. His crash took out Fittipaldi and the snake-bitten Marcus Ericsson.
That was on lap 1.
On lap 1. So he didn't even make it to the first
corner.
Spin. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I really felt bad for Marcus Ericsson after having the struggles he had after he crashed his primary car, went to his backup, got in the field barely, 32nd, I believe, and then he finished 33rd, which is terrible for them. But Tom just went low, right? It was a scenario of going too low. You hit the curb and off you go. So he is not, by the way, Rookie of the Year.
He is not Rookie of the Year. Yep. Moving on to further not Rookie of the Year, 30th place, Marcus Armstrong, in what would be a little bit of a theme in the early part of this race. Actually, a little bit of a theme, not only for the early part of this race, but also the month of May. Marcus Armstrong out in 30th place with an engine failure. That would be a Honda engine failure.
Surprised to see all 3 of those go, right?
Oh, yeah.
He's one of 3 Honda engines that went.
Indeed.
I was gutted for him. I like that kid. I think he's really good. He seems very intelligent, understands the car. He's got a great coach now that's helping him overcome his mental sort of struggles, if you want to call it struggles. I think we all have that in life here and there. But I was sad to see that. And I was surprised to see how many engines went on the Honda side for the actual race. I know there were some issues on the Chevy side, which I think we'll talk about a little bit later, but that wasn't during the race. That was in the qualifying sessions.
Right. Most of our listeners are your higher level IndyCar fans, but in case you're scratching your head a little bit, Marcus Armstrong's a rookie because he contested the full year last year, but didn't contest any of the ovals. Mm-hmm. So this was his first oval of the season. This was his first oval of his IndyCar career. He finishes 30th with a Honda engine issue. 28th place goes to his Chip Ganassi Racing teammate Linus Lundqvist. He crashed out. I don't want to say he crashed out on his own. I think going four wide into a corner,
yeah.
And he decided to back off. And certainly when he backed off, it changes, your weight distribution on that car. And he just got up into the gray and just rode it right into the wall. So tough introduction there.
I'm glad they showed that replay and they showed how that developed from the middle of the front straightaway into turn one, because it really was no fault of him that they ended up four wide. He was just a victim of the circumstances, which is really hard for me to see and go, man, the kid did nothing wrong.
I know. Yeah.
And ends up hitting the wall. So that was disappointing. Again, not being aggressive, not being, out of line. It just the way it worked out, unfortunately.
Yep, 27 laps into this race, and you've got folks taking it four wide into a turn like that. It's unnecessary. Nobody wants to back off.
And how does the delay sort of get into that? And the driver's mindset.
Yeah,
because you saw the beginning of the race, everybody's just going for it, and so this is one of those instances where you're like, it's too early to be four wide, and no fault to his own.
Right, it is, and I wondered in the aggression in the opening laps like that, I had wondered if some of that was because maybe there was a thought or a notion, but they're pretty well informed, these teams are. Maybe there was a thought or a notion that this would be another rain delay, right? Like rain might be coming, because it was interesting to me that it's 500 miles. It's a long race. There's a lot of pit stops and everything, that they were that aggressive that early. So it almost made me feel like maybe there's a chance of rain, like a slim chance of rain, but I never heard anything on the TV. Now I'll tell you, at the campground we were at, our cable situation wasn't great. And so if it was said on the broadcast, then I certainly missed it. I've not had a chance to rewatch that broadcast, but I don't know why they were as aggressive as they were in the opening laps of that race.
Yeah, I don't think there was anything to be said about why they were so aggressive. I think it was people were just amped up and ready to go so early that you wait 4.5 hours, whatever it might be, and you get out there and everybody's just raring to go. And the track, they said the track was green, right? So rain washed all the rubber off. I think you can pretty much go anywhere, and then it gets slippery because you're starting to put rubber down, but it's still kind of greasy, oily, like all that stuff kind of plays into it. And there was a lot going on in the first 100 and some laps when it came to incidences.
21st, the CGR teammate of Kiffin Simpson. He finished this race 21st, his first Indianapolis 500. Started 18th, finished 21st, kept it clean, largely anonymous, right? And I think that's okay in this situation, because there was some carnage behind him in terms of what happened at the rest of CGR, other than of course the two lead drivers there. But
he was the last car on the lead lap.
He was.
That finished the race.
Was indeed. Yep. So I'm gonna take these two together. 18th place goes to the one-off NASCAR double, Kyle Larson. He finished 18th. While Ed Carpenter Racing's Christian Rasmussen finished 12th place. The reason I'm putting those two together is because, to nobody's surprise, Kyle Larson is the Rookie of the Year. We've talked about this before, Tim, because it's happened this way before. Do you agree with this still?
I was contemplating this when I heard the news earlier today, because I heard it yesterday, but I knew I was doing the show, and I was thinking about it a little bit. And this happened with Alonso, didn't it?
It did.
Yeah. And so I'm not surprised. And I think what they take into, we've read what they take into sort of consideration of this, but as
I have it. I have it from Nathan Brown.
Okay.
Yep. Nathan Brown tweeted this earlier today. The Indianapolis 500 Rookie of the Year should be presented to the driver who has performed with the most distinction among first-year drivers in the Indianapolis 500. Criteria includes on-track performance in practice, qualifying, and the race, media and fan interaction, sportsmanship, and positive influence on the Indy 500.
Well, then it's an easy choice. It's
an easy
Larson,
choice,
right?
Yep.
Yeah, at that
over
point,
5 million viewers, right?
Mm-hmm,
8% increase over last year.
I think it's a little unfair though, because he's really not a rookie. Like it's
nope, not at all.
So again, he's a rookie to open wheel and Indy 500 situation, but he's not a true rookie. I think Christian drove a phenomenal race, was very aggressive. That's your notes say that as well. But he was super aggressive, and was out to win. And he finished. He didn't make the mistake, right? You don't.
Correct.
Larson made the mistake. And you're with a team that isn't as on the same caliber as what Kyle Larson is with McLaren. And so I think you outperform him in the race, but when you look at all the criteria, it goes to Kyle Larson. So I think any of these drivers coming into this that are rookies from the start, they didn't have a shot, right?
Nope.
You shouldn't even be looking for that. You should just be in there to do your race and not make any mistakes. So Larson obviously does the speed limit violation, which
doesn't surprise me, right? Yeah, because he had that in practice. I think, somebody like Scott Dixon that had the same issue just a few years ago. Mm-hmm. It's tricky because they don't practice coming in to the pits off of turn 4 like they do in the race. And that would be one of those things that, just through experience, that's his true rookiness, right? Is that he didn't understand that level of what he needed to do not to be caught speeding onto pit lane. So rookie of the year based on the criteria, far and away.
Yep.
Right. Rookie of the year in terms of, here's the thing. If he hadn't had the speeding penalty, he very well could have finished within the top 10 and all of this question would have been completely out the window.
Absolutely.
But
you make a rookie mistake.
Right. Yeah. Sad for
18th.
Rasmussen, though, but you take nothing away from what he did and how he performed at this race. So, good for him.
Yep.
Moving on to past winners, Marcus Ericsson, which I have Armstrong in the notes too, by the way. Sorry. Marcus Ericsson, 33rd, caught up in the crash with the spinning Blomqvist. We talked about that already. I couldn't feel worse for a driver in this 500 than I do Marcus Ericsson, like you said. Crashed in practice, had to go to a backup car. I'm sure it was a very well-prepared backup car, but not to the degree that the primary would have been.
Apparently not. It was slower than slow.
Slow, right. Barely made it in, right? If they would have been watching if Dale Coyne Racing would have been watching Sage Karam's Twitter account, they would have seen how they could have blocked Marcus Ericsson from ever getting into this race and kept him out. I mean, it was literally that close. Mm-hmm. And Sage Karam was tweeting away on how Dale Coyne could line up the cars and get everybody in line that would have prevented Ericsson from making that run, which eventually earned him a spot in the race. And I think it would have been able to do it in such a way where Nolan Siegel would have never even had to have taken track again. Mm-hmm. Would have just had cars in line. So I feel awful for him. I feel awful. I don't think this season has gone the way that he expected it to. I think that this is kind of hopefully the rock bottom for this. It's just not been a good season for Ericsson since joining Andretti Global as a paid driver, and that was his goal, right? That was his goal in leaving Ganassi and joining Andretti. He wanted to be a paid driver. He wanted to be appreciated for his talents on track and not just for the check that he brought.
Yeah, what I don't understand, and it all comes back down to qualifying and why you're in that position. Absolutely. To begin with, you're back there with rookies and you get caught up in an accident that you shouldn't be in anyways. So my point is, I don't understand a team as big as Andretti Global that you do not have another IndyCar set up just in the camp. It's not assigned to any driver that is Indy 500 ready, just in case you have an accident in practice and you got to go to a backup. That backup, and I don't know what the rules say, but that backup could go to any of those drivers that are on the team, and it's essentially ready to go. You have so much practice. You have so much pre-practice, which I know got rained out, the practice in April or whenever it was, that you should be rotating other cars in, or at least one other car that has the same capability as the 3 or 4 you got on track.
Wouldn't you think that Devlin DeFrancesco's Indy 500 car would have been in the shop, mostly ready to go from last year? Since they're a 3-car team this year, you would think that they would have
they'd have that 4th car ready to go.
Indy 500 cars ready to go. And that team doesn't seem to be hurting for cash either, because they're building a Formula One program in a series that they're not even allowed to race. Mm-hmm. So
4 or 5, right? Because Andretti, you figure what? Yeah. They added Marco, so Marco was in
correct.
One of them
Yeah. Ryan Hunter-Reay, 27th. We got to talk about this, Tim. He crashed into the back of Dixon, but he wanted Dixon to get a penalty.
I saw your tweet on that.
So my response here is, and I'll let you have a more thoughtful response. My response here is, whatever, dude, just go home. Okay, I'm done. So can you be a little bit more rational than me?
It's interesting because in the moment, and I still think today, I'm gonna unfortunately have to disagree. I felt like
defend this.
I felt like Dixon came down. There was more than a car width when Ryan Hunter-Reay went out there, and he went down, and Ryan Hunter-Reay did not make contact until he had 2 tires in the grass.
Mm-hmm.
And from my perspective in looking at it, it was a blocking move on a high-speed track, of course, going over 200 miles an hour. And I thought a penalty was warranted, but I guess I'd love to hear what the listeners have to say about that, because I think it's one of those things where if it was the other way around, Ryan Hunter-Reay is getting a penalty. But what do I know?
I feel like somebody like Dixon is racing forward and probably thinking to himself, there's no way somebody's even if there is room, okay? Mm-hmm. That's where Pato wrecked last year, right? A little further down going into turn 3, right?
Into turn 3,
That's where Pato wrecked last year.
Yes, for sure.
Why would you be making that move on lap 107? And I think that Dixon, a 6-time champion, right? The Iceman, 20 years experience, is probably thinking to himself, no, nobody's going in there, right? And he was racing forward. He was racing his own race. He cleared willpower, which I'm sure was Dixon's priority, because he wasn't thinking about a Ryan Hunter-Reay who's never been in an accident that he's caused coming that close, and making it 3 wide and being practically on the grass.
Yeah.
I don't know how you run into somebody and ask for that person to get a penalty.
Yeah, and I don't think it was. It almost looked intentional, but knowing who Dixon is, you give him the benefit of the doubt, right?
Exactly right.
I think that's the situation.
Yeah.
But I think if it's reversed, you give still Dixon the benefit of the doubt, and someone else pays the price. So
this past winters again. So Willpower 24th. This crushed me. I had on my Willpower jersey. I had told baby girl I'm wearing the jersey of this year's winner. I was ready for Willpower to be up there drinking the milk for a second time in his career. I was ready. Fell back early, just didn't have the car, and didn't get back, and overdrove it.
I guess it wasn't meant to be. Yeah, overdrove it, hit the wall hard, and that was it. But I expected him to be up there a little more. I was on the sort of the fence of, I hope the top 3 kind of start to trickle through the field.
Yes.
And others come to the front. And that was sort of my MO going into the race. And that's what I wanted to see. And it happened with him. So I was happy on that front. I wasn't happy on the other ones, but it's a bummer for Power, because I think all 3 of those cars should have won, right? Like all 3 of them had the capability, and obviously referring to the Penske cars. So I wasn't crushed. I'll just put it that way.
I was crushed. I was crushed. Elio Castroneves finished 20th. He was not happy with the card. That was the most politically correct, very biting his tongue Elio Castroneves I think I've ever seen in a post-race interview as a team co-owner, so to speak, right? Mm-hmm. He did his best job. He wasn't happy with the car. I think his issue was the car wasn't geared correctly. So he was struggling with on the restarts in particular. And he was losing space, losing spots on the restart and then getting his spots back, but that was about the best he could do. So he was kind of a little bit tied up trying to get.
That's interesting how you missed that, but at least he knows, right? He's like, here's what we did. And I just wonder, was it the same for the other two cars on the
That's team? What I was going to say, but we would never know, right? Because Felix ultimately, had the engine issue right in the beginning, and then Tom Blomqvist, wrecked out. So you don't really know if that was just a Meyer Shank issue or if it was just an issue on Elio's car or not. But I would suspect that it was the same. But here's the other piece too. They're getting Andretti Autosport engineering assistance. Mm-hmm. Herta looked okay, right? Kirkwood looked okay.
Yeah, they didn't look great after they kept saying
they looked great, but they looked better than this, right? Than Elio did.
Well, you figure Herta goes out, he's in third place. He did look good, right? But then he throws it away, and
he's a dum-dum. Just as my favorite part is he's not a dum-dum. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. Just as TV, because TV has gone over and above trying to promote Colton Herta this year. Just as TV was saying that he's matured and he's doing so much better, and then all of a sudden, boom, he crashes himself.
Yeah.
And it didn't even look that bad. It almost looked like, hey, dude, just get me restarted so I can go to the pit for a new wing. It didn't look that bad. I couldn't understand why they were loading that car.
But it wasn't broke. Yeah, they loaded it up, and then next thing you know, he's jumping back in. I'm like, why even go back in at that point? Your race is well over with. But he goes back in, and he ends up not finishing from what I'm looking at the chart. Right. He only finished 170 laps and has contact, so he wasn't even running at the end. So he must have came out and something was wrong with the car, which makes sense to me. Something was not right with that.
Not a past winner, but it's also not the first tangent we've had today. Sato finishes 14th.
Yeah.
Right? The best of the RLL cars.
Oh gosh! Yeah,
right, those for the weekend, right? I mean, honestly, he finishes one spot ahead of Graham, best of the RLL cars, because I think that team struggled again. So that Project Indy, whatever it is, worked for one car, and it was the one-off car of Sato. Sato could drive that thing sideways, like in full drift, all the way around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for 4 laps, and
he's got it.
I think that's how he was able to do it.
He knows how to drive the track. He knows how to drive the car. He knows how to put himself in scary situations that I just cringe as I'm watching it going,
yep,
that's going to end up bad. And then somehow he escapes on the other side.
Yep. The 2016 winner, Alexander Rossi, finishes 4th. Pato Awards, and I'm sure you've seen it. Everybody's seen it on social media. Pato Awards outward expression of emotion could easily be found on the face of Alexander Rossi if Alexander Rossi had any outward showing of emotion. You have to be crushed for Rossi because to me, if it wasn't going to be power, I thought it was going to be Rossi.
I thought it was going to be Rossi too. I thought it was Rossi's weekend to win this thing. And he had speed. He had a great handling car. At the end of the day, you get passed by Pato near the end of the race here, where Pato finished second. But I thought it was Rossi's day. Rossi was up there most of the day. I thought it was Rossi's day week ago, 2 weeks ago, whatever full day was, when he was done qualifying and his what he said, he goes, I'm irritated. He was just I think Penske drivers were just grinding it in that they were so good and they were going to take the front row, and Rossi was determined to get himself on the front row just to break up the posse, we'll call it.
Yeah.
He doesn't do it. He's just angry when they interview him. And I was like, he's just gonna take it to him in the race, and I don't know what
He
happened.
had a monster first lap on that pole qualifying. He had the first
Oh, they
234,
freed that car up
right?
as much as they could free it up.
And they were screaming in the stands. Now, mind you, I'm driving from I-94 from Chicago back home, listening to this on the radio, and you could hear them screaming in the stands when Rossi hit that 234, right?
Yeah.
But I think he took too much out of the tire in that first, either in the warm-up lap or in that first lap, and that was it for him because the consistency was downhill and he was just hanging on after that.
He was hanging on, but he
Yeah,
was out there to
yeah,
win it. It was everything. He couldn't have got one more thing out of that car. Maybe
yep,
to your point, if he didn't do the warm up as fast, potentially as fast as he did, maybe he saved the tires. But I think they trimmed it out so much
yeah,
that once you start doing a 4-wheel slide, you're
yeah.
just
You're scrubbing.
scrubbing
Mm-hmm.
speed.
Too
And
much.
that's what I think got him in the qualifying. But I think at that point, he was determined to win this race. And
Yeah,
unfortunately, he didn't. But as a past winner, winning on a fuel mileage strategy race, which I think everybody knows in the Napa
yep,
machine, for him not to come through was a little heartbreaking.
yeah.
Yeah. I was in a house that it was anybody but a Penske car, but that's how our house sort of went to this and watched this race.
Oh, your house was not rooting Team Penske?
No,
Your
I
house
think there
was
was.
rooting all papaya.
It was, well, you know that from going
Yes,
to Indy and going to the trailers to buy merchandise. But
yes,
of course, that's what they're. But even me, who's not a hater of anybody, I was kind of like, let's see if somebody else can make this happen. And
yeah,
whether it was Papaya or whether it was um, Connor Daly, whether it was
yeah,
Ferrucci or even I'd take Dixon again if it had to be
yeah.
Dixon again. I know it'd only be a second, but anyway.
I was in a camper where everybody was rooting papaya, right? Between Alexander Rossi and Callum Ilott, of course.
Oh
And of
yes.
course, Bill and Jill from Shelby were all
Mhm.
Team Penske. I was I was Will Power, of course, Team Penske, but I was secretly, quietly rooting for Rossi. I was crushed for Rossi at the end of this thing.
Yeah.
Almost to the same degree that I was with Power. Not the same, but almost to the same degree I was with Power. And here's the thing. Dixon finishes third. And my question was, how in the hell did he get past Rossi? Well, I found out today. It's on Twitter. Rossi, you know that slow finish to the checkered in Rossi's 2016 win at Indy?
Mm-hmm.
It looked just like that. That's how Dixon got around him.
Ah.
Almost his closing rate on Rossi, I think, surprised Dixon.
Hmm.
Because he really had to make a nice sharp left to avoid running right into the back of doing a Ryan Hunter-Ray up the back of Rossi. So,
And blaming Rossi.
yep. Past winner, I'll ask you this. Dixon, as we found out during Timmy's trivia, is the lap leader here. Do you think he'll ever win this thing again? I don't know how many more
No.
years he's going to race. You think he'll
No, I
win
don't
this thing
think
again?
so. Nope.
You think Pelot will win it before Dixon wins the second one?
Well, yes, because I don't think Dixon's going to win a second one. So yes, Award's going to potentially get one.
No, Award or Pelot.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Who gets? Let's throw them both in there. Who gets one before Dixon gets number two? Is it Award or Pelot?
I think
Award, Pelot, or
it's
Dixon?
that's very tough to say. I think it's Pelot. I think just his consistency overall and his demeanor. If he's got the car, he's going to make it happen. He finished fifth and was pretty much not talked about the entire race, in my
That's
opinion.
right. Yeah.
Just like silently there
Yep.
doing his thing. But you got to look at Dixon wasn't there until this yellow
To
flag
the end.
came out. Yeah,
Dixon started 20th,
I know.
21st.
Tells you how good
If
he
it
is.
hadn't been for Connor Daly, Dixon would have had the biggest mover of the race,
Yeah,
right? Started
it just
21st,
shows.
finished
Yeah.
third.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
unreal, right? That's Dixon doing Dixon things. And first, and we're not going to spend a lot of time here because we're going to go back, but our first back-to-back winner since 2001 to Joseph Newgarden takes that $440,000 Borg Warner bonus, along with almost $4 million of the record payout. But we'll get to him in a little bit.
Yeah, I heard it was quiet.
Yeah, so John Oriovitz, who is a author who wrote the book about the split, he tweeted that the reception for Newgarden was muted, or what I'm paraphrasing, but it was basically what he was saying was that the reception for Newgarden was muted. Nobody who was in there with Newgarden in the stands looked muted. But those people had been drinking since 9 a.m. and it was 8 p.m. So I'm sure that they were enjoying themselves quite a bit.
Yeah.
So seeing the winner of the Indy 500 come rolling into the stands again.
Yeah. Interesting.
Tim, can we talk about lap leaders? And I've got motive for doing this. Lap leaders. I'm just going to cover the top three because, well, I got motive. And this is the subplots. Scott McLaughlin, who we have not talked about, led 64 laps of this race. Led from pole. Right.
Saw the yellow submarine a lot.
Absolutely. Strongest car, just fell back. Didn't get it right. Didn't make the adjustments.
I wonder if that's staying up on top of the car and understanding how it's going to change as you go in the evening, and you just missed a wing adjustment at the end.
Maybe
that would have put it in that sweet spot that Newgarden was able to do, and they just didn't do it on Scott's because Scott's like, the car is perfect. It's going to be perfect to the end. I don't know. But he did. He faded at the end. But maybe it's everybody's turning the wick up. But he looked he made some great restarts, passing multiple cars.
Yep.
Newgarden did the same thing pretty early on, like lap 100, whatever it might be, coming around the outside of several cars. At that point, I think in retrospect, you look back and you should have known at that point that he was coming and he was going to take the win. I'm back on Newgarden. Sorry, I'm all over the place.
Yeah, McLaughlin, 64 laps, but he had Simon Pagenaud on the pit stand. Here's the other thing. Scott McLaughlin's the only team member of Team Penske who didn't lose anybody on his crew because of the penalty. From the
penalty? What are you talking
mistake
about?
Or cheating, Tim? What is it?
Oh, geez, I don't know. Is there like an in-between word?
I don't know.
It's cheating. There, I said it. I know it's cheating.
Yeah.
Everybody knows it's cheating.
Yeah,
hence
Scott McLaughlin's 64.
The crowd with the victory.
Right. He finishes sixth. Just crushed for him. I like the idea of Simon Pagenaud being on that pit stand, and I hope that he continues to work with Simon because I think that'll be really, really good for him.
Yeah,
Joseph Newgarden.
Him or did Scott?
I think Scott did, or Scott asked him, or maybe there was no exchange there, but he Pagenaud was helping.
It was good to see him with the Penske.
It was great.
And
with the Jill DeFerrin tribute, which I did not catch on TV, only caught on Twitter. Which to me, if that wasn't on TV, that was a miss, man. That was a big time miss. But anyway, Joseph Newgarden, 26 laps. Timmy, Stingray Rob, 23 laps led. Okay.
Yeah.
Almost twice as many laps led as Pato O'Ward, Scott Dixon, and Alexander Rossi. Listener Phil from Shelby, not to be confused from Bill from Shelby, but listener Phil from Shelby, help me with this because I tweeted, I texted Phil and said, I have no idea how to talk about Stingray Rob and his 23 laps led. And Phil's words are, so I'm giving Phil 100% credit for this. On merit, but off strategy.
Yep.
That's wonderful word crafting.
Yeah.
Wonderful word
crafting.
Better. Yep. Engines, Timmy. Subplots. 3 Honda engines gone in this race. Armstrong, lap 3. Catherine Legg, thank you, autocorrect. Catherine Legg, lap 23. Rosenquist, lap 58. It was a bad race for the Quists. Mm-hmm. And we're popular in Sweden. We have a pretty good listenership in Sweden.
Yeah, we do.
So that Honda had their issues. Chevy too had their issues. These plenum events, right?
Mm-hmm.
The first time I remember hearing about a plenum event was when Honda was in the original kart series, right? With 1,000+ horsepower, and there was development going on daily.
Back in the day.
Correct. But not heard a lot of plenum events. I thought it was funny though, Chevy doing this thing like, well, we're working globally around, right now with dynos, and we're running and we're trying to just, decide what happened here and trying to work it out or whatever. And it's like, were you really putting that much horsepower into that? That's kind of amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But
it is the greatest single day sporting event in the world.
Absolutely. Maybe they were.
They put a ton of money into this event, right? This is why they're in the series, is for the Indy 500, and they come away with the checkered flag. So,
yeah. So both teams or both engine manufacturers are exploring the limits of this existing platform. I mean, this is almost to the degree of the DW12, right? But they're really, really coming after it, which is good to see, right? Mm-hmm. It was kind of shocking. I'll be curious to see what this impacts some of those Chevy teams through the balance of the season. Anybody who has to take an extra engine, who's outside of their allocation, and what kind of penalties that works out to. Because when you look at the standings and you've got Palou and you've got Dixon, in those standings, that's where you start to wonder, right, what kind of impact this is going to take on the rest of the season, if any of those guys need to take an engine outside of their allocation.
Yeah. So, I think the first time we saw this, the Chevy issue was with Larson in qualifying.
Yeah.
And got out of it as soon as it did what it did. And then there was other issues with the Chevy power plant. But I was really surprised to see the Hondas go up.
Yeah. Yep.
But that's the old days, man. The engines used to go quite a bit. You'd always wonder, they're going to hang on to the end. But they were all early.
Yep.
Which was another interesting sort of facet of it. Normally it's several hundreds of miles into the race and then they blow up. But
right. All right. Let's get on with it. The winners. The winners, who I've been calling cheater, pumpkin eaters for a few weeks. Now we're going to call them winner, chicken dinners. Team Penske. And on behalf of Team Penske, I want to thank AJ Foyt Racing and Michael Cannon, along with IndyCar, for helping this team at long last to, again, reclaim their status as the benchmark at IMS. Let me unpack what I just said. AJ Foyt Racing, they have a technical partnership with Team Penske. Michael Cannon is a Indy 500 genius, and largely attributed to the success that AJ Foyt Racing had last year in almost putting Santino Ferrucci on that winner's elevator. Mm-hmm. And I think that was definitely helpful for Penske, although they tried to downplay it. And Ferrucci had some very colorful way of describing that was a bologna sandwich. I say IndyCar because this story, I think it was largely overlooked by some folks in that IndyCar mandated a suspension change, that some teams were using an older push rod, which in this case, not in the engine, but in the suspension, that was less aerodynamic, right? Less aero efficiency in the older push rod. Less aerodynamic efficiency in the new push rod versus the old, but some teams were still using the old because of the aero efficiency. And many believe that this came out of Chip Ganassi racing. And as people have migrated to different teams and things, some of those tricks have gotten out. So now that everybody was forced to use the same updated push rods that are less aerodynamic, Team Penske is saying that helped bring everybody back. 0.5 mile an hour to 1 mile an hour difference for some teams. So, yeah. Are they still the best team in IndyCar? Pretty close to it, right? 1A, 1B, any given weekend with Chip Ganassi racing. But
I felt like Chip Ganassi racing missed the mark here at this Indy 500 after last year.
Totally agree. Yep.
Yeah.
I think I would give that 51% Honda and 49% Chip Ganassi though.
Yeah, okay. I can't disagree with that. I think that it's a fair statement. Honda was sort of nowhere to be found, especially qualifying. And then even in the race, when you looked at the standings as they kept going, there's a lot of Chevrolets up front.
Yep. We talked a lot about Will Power, finishes 24th place, crashed on his own. Scott McLaughlin, we talked a bit about, finishes 6th from his record-setting pole. I think a win at Indianapolis is inevitable for Scott McLaughlin. When? Don't know, but I think it will happen. He just didn't have the car in the second half. Who did have the car in the second half was certainly Joseph Newgarden. He started third, won back-to-back, was strong this year. Can't take anything away from him. I mean, I know we've had the issues, and hopefully we'll be able to put some of this behind us. But we had some of the issues. But at the end of the day, that team knows that they're under a level of scrutiny that is unprecedented at this point. So they were able to go out there and perform. They were able to go out there and perform without Tim Cindric on the timing stand. And really put up something interesting. $4.288 million is the winner's goes to the winner, including the $440,000 Borg Warner bonus. That's the back-to-back bonus. The total purse this year, Tim, was almost $18.5 million. Second place getting a little over $1 million for Pato Award. Tim, that's a big deal.
Yeah, it's the biggest purse ever.
Yeah. That's a big deal. That's big money.
It's increased year over year for the last 3 years. It's been going up and up, which is, it is a big deal. You look at the attendance, you look at the money it brings in. You got to look at the TV sort of package too. What all the money that comes in for this one event, it should be a big purse, and it is, which is good to see for the series and good to see for the drivers that put their lives on the line to go out there and do this.
Yeah. Joseph Newgarden joins some rare company. I'm not a hater, but I'm generally not a fan. He isn't somebody that I root for, easily. I'm a big power fan. I like Alexander Rossi, I like Scott McLaughlin, things like that. But you got to stand up and notice. And again, I've now referenced Nathan Brown twice. Nathan posted, there's just a handful of drivers that have 30 career wins or more, 2 Indy 500s, and 2 championships. Let me give you these names. You can tell me if you recognize any of these names. AJ Foyt.
Nope.
Al Sr. Bobby Unser. Al Jr. Dario Franchitti, which that one kind of surprised me. Dario Franchitti and Joseph Newgarden.
Wow. Some good names to be
among the greats.
Matched against. Yeah, that's really good.
We talk a lot about Scott Dixon and Scott Dixon's accomplishments. He's not on that list because he doesn't have a second Indy 500 win.
Yeah. He may get it. I said earlier he wouldn't, but he may.
It's totally possible.
I know there's people that think he's the GOAT, he's the best ever, and
of this generation of driver, I would say.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Is he better than an AJ or a Mario or an Al Sr.? No. But also those guys ran different races. Those guys ran different series. Those guys ran a completely different situation than what Dixon is in. Dixon is great, ahead above the people that he has raced against in the last 20 years. Yeah.
I'll have to say on Newgarden's win, well-deserved win. He went out there and outdrove everybody. They yo-yoed in the beginning with track position, still working on the car to get where it needed to be. And at the end of the day, working with his engineer and making the changes they needed to make, they had the car to beat. And I think everybody knew it with 20, 30 to go that was the car that needed to be beat. And it just didn't happen. Much better win than last year. Last year's win is kind of like one of those that you go, okay. But this one, I think, is a true dual understanding where you need to be at what point during the race to make the last lap pass, which I think has only happened 4 times in IndyCar history, by the way. And you pull it off. And so as you're sitting watching as a fan who watches a lot of races, you're almost like trying to help drivers go, no, don't pass yet. Why'd you wait? Go now, do this. And he had it all lined up. And maybe it's a little bit of luck in there. I think there's always a little bit of luck, but at the end of the day, he lined it up and got that last lap pass.
Yeah. I think the Penske's were definitely the cars to beat in the beginning of this.
Oh, yeah.
Newgarden, I think that experience and kind of the trust of the car and everything, I think helps him develop that car throughout the race. You would think that Power would have that same situation, but Power was lost 2 people on his team because of the, do we call it a cheating scandal? So I think, maybe that hampered his race. Maybe it didn't, who knows? Yeah. Scott McLaughlin finishes 6th. I think part of that is at some point during the race, he may not know what he needs, right? How much influence does somebody like Pagenaud have? Pagenaud's not in the car.
Yeah, you can't feel it. Yep.
Right. So there's only so much that, somebody like that can do. So
well, you figure between...
Can't take it away from him, though. I'll give you that. Because Pato raced him hard. And
Pato put everything
had
into
nothing
that. And you
for
could tell by the emotions. He put everything he had into that, and even took a risky pass, I would say, on his teammate to get into that second position. Yep. So it was either win or crash, or win or
crashed up another Papaya car.
Yeah. And so you talked about how Penske was dominant, and they were so dominant that the 2 Penske cars that you just mentioned led 92 of the 200 laps, almost half, almost 50%.
Yep.
So they were the team to beat all day long. Again, we talked about Power, how he fell out and then eventually crashed. Something just didn't work on that car for whatever reason. But
just fell out.
92 of the 200 laps, that's a lot. That's a big deal, Dan.
That's a big deal. That is a big deal.
But it wasn't unexpected based on where they qualified. I don't think any of this was unexpected.
No, I'll give you that one. Papaya. I believe this represents a turning point for this team. This team has a tremendous amount of focus on them. A lot of people looking at where they're at, what they've been able to accomplish or lack thereof, and a lot of talking out of this team. They are by far the most popular team on the paddock. You see it every time we go there. It is Papaya everywhere, right?
Yep.
And Zach Brown loves to talks. But the team hasn't really accomplished anything, right? What have they really? They got a win by default because of the disqualification at St. Pete. You could argue, okay, well, they've been in contention. Okay, that's great.
Yeah, I think so. They were in contention last year at Indy, I think.
They were in contention in Indy, right?
They've come along. I think to your point, they were in the spotlight the entire month. It wasn't, they showed up in the race and they've done some stuff. They were there for qualifying. They were the only.
They had Larson there, so there was even more.
Anything for Penske. Yeah, they had Larson there, so that was a huge story. And it just goes on and on, right? It just keeps building and building and building. They've been part of this David Malukas thing that sort of they're always in the news. And I think the mantra that any news is good news. It doesn't matter bad, good. It's good for the organization. It's good for the company, and we continue to grow and we continue to gather fan support. And so people love them and want them. And maybe that's why it was so mute, because everybody was there looking for Papaya to win, and it just didn't happen.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe you're right.
But I think there's a little bit of both of that, right?
That Max Verstappen factor, right? Nobody wants to see like the continuous dynasty of the win over win kind of thing. So they might have been looking for some new blood. Larson, as we talked about, finishes 18th. Certainly would have finished higher without the drive-through penalty. Callum Ilott finishes 11th. Callum was literally driving with one hand tied behind his back. He had a weight jacker issue, which was originally identified on TV as a shifting issue. So they changed steering wheels. As our friend Spencer sent me the updates on this, it was a weight jacker issue. They had the weight jacker was fully stiff, I believe, for the entirety of the race, which means they had to dial in a bunch of front wing, which at Indianapolis is not the right way to go. Nonetheless, 11th place finish for this guy. Solid finish for this guy. Will he be in Papaya next year? Man, I hope so. I believe so. So. But he totally deserves it. He definitely, he finished over last year's team, which is always what you want to do. Connor Daly said it right in 100 Days in, 100 Days in Indy. But That's for another podcast. So he finishes there. Rossi, as we talked about, fourth place, just a kick in the right.
Yeah.
And
totally
2 laps shy of the fuel he needed to challenge Joseph and to challenge his teammate in award bridesmaid. Second place from 8th. Yeah. Tim, he didn't have the car that Rossi had, but he had it when it mattered.
He had something when it mattered. I don't know if it was a car or if it was the cojones. He was out there to
car, cojones, and fuel. He had it all.
Yeah, that's a good point. Rossi was struggling with fuel, which that's a mismanagement.
2 laps, big time, yeah.
Yeah, like how do you mismanage that when you have that caution that puts you in that window, and you got to early on, you got to make sure you got the fuel there. And if it's a short fill or something that happened, or a misstep with regard to how long the fuel nozzle was in there on the last stop, you can't have that happen at the Indy 500. And if that's the reason Rossi had to back out and lost even a third place at that point, then that's got to be looked at the team. I think the funniest part about this team, and the funniest thing that I like the whole race, was Kyle Larson asking what the weight jacket does and how does it change the car. Like, he's like, so what does this thing do? And if I move it this way, what happens? And if I move it that way, what happens? And so
it's like around a wedge.
Yeah.
Right? It's like around a wedge.
Him, right? He'd be like, okay, I know what that is then.
Yeah.
So it just goes back.
We're going to put some wedge in it, or we're going to take some wedge out.
What does this do, and when should I use it? So based on how I feel. So
see, I do know NASCAR terminology, believe it or not.
Yeah, we know you do. You're smart.
Chip Ganassi Racing, Dixon third from 21st, unreal. Alex Palou finishes 5th. I think all around disappointment for Palou, especially after winning the Indy GP the way that he did. I think the only consolation prize is here, he's been in the top 5 every race this season so far. Kevin Simpson, 21st, as we talked about. Lundqvist, 28th, just kind of caught up in the Lundqvist curse. And then Armstrong with 30th with the engine. Tim, this is a disappointment to me, CGR. We touched on it earlier, but this has got to be a disappointment for this team. Is this a 5-car team problem, or is this a Honda problem, which is really what I'm kind of writing it off to? What are your thoughts?
This is simple. I can take what they did and put it against what Andretti's done in the past. It's simply too many cars. That's all it is. Oh, you don't have enough resources for all those cars. Yeah. You got to slim that down.
Yeah. I think it's got to be difficult because we know that there's a people shortage. Racing is about people. And if you're just getting bodies, right? And I'm sure it's Chip Ganassi, they're getting quality bodies. But if you're just getting bodies in on some of those cars, I think you're likely to struggle.
Yeah. It's partially Honda, but I think it's too many cars.
Yep. I got some honorable mentions. This is really no wonderful insight on my part because it really just rounds out the top 10. Kyle Kirkwood, 7th, best of the Andrettis. Races better, smarter when he needs to. I've said that for a long time. Santino Ferrucci, 8th place. Great here, great at Indianapolis, but he's got to start putting this Penske partnership to use elsewhere.
Sound like my son. Heard it all weekend.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's all I kept saying.
I love it.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree 100%. Yep. Like, he's super talented. Like, I don't know what's going on when it comes to all the other horses, but they've got to take what they need to extract more out of Penske for everything else and not give up what they gave up. I think at Indy, which I felt like they gave a lot of intel to Penske to have them where they were. And then Ferrucci looked really good all day. And then again, at the end, you got to keep up with the changing conditions, in my opinion. And they didn't.
That could be resources again, right? Where AJ Foyt's been kind of starved for resources over in the past. Rinus VeeKay finishes 9th. Connor Daly finishes 10th. Tim, I don't know who needed this finish more, Rinus or Daly. I mean, Rinus has been unlucky. He's been very fast at Indianapolis. He's been unlucky, and he's been kind of clumsy at times, right? Mm-hmm. Connor Daly was fired from his full-time ride last year, a full-time ride where it sounds like he brought the primary sponsorship to that team, but he was fired from that team nevertheless. And that team really never found their footing even after they moved away from Daly. So honestly, I don't know who needed this more, VK or Daly, but I'm happy for both.
I think VK. Just because he's in the series full time and needs to stay in the series full time, where Daly's already out. He's got a great show that he does. Right? Why are you looking at me?
He's got a show.
I thought it's really good. He's got a great personality. I think he brings a lot to the show.
He's gotten better.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, he's gotten better. Which we all
listened to it on
the
one time. Yeah. We listened to it in the car one day. It was fun.
Look, I'm winding down my podcast. I can't really, I guess. And Dale Jr. doesn't own my show, so I guess I really shouldn't say. I have nothing to say here. I want to put you on the spot for a couple of things here. Disappointments. I'm going to give you two teams: Andretti and Schenk. I think I'm willing to give Schenk a pass.
I am too.
Because it was crashes, right? It was a crash by a rookie, and it was a blown engine. And
it was a third car. You just didn't get the gearing right? Yeah, I think Andretti came in with high hopes. They talked, like I mentioned earlier, all month about how good their cars were. Maybe not qualifying speed, but definitely race cars on race day. And it showed until Herta made his mistake, at least in one of the 3-4 cars that they have. So the 4 cars that they had out there. So from my perspective, Andretti's got to be the most disappointed in this situation.
I would agree with you there. I think that the team is strong. I think that going to the 3 cars has been a good move for them. I think that Marcus Ericsson will eventually pan out there. Herta's had a decent season, but it's early. Mm-hmm. And he had the crash at Indy and tangled with his teammate at Indy GP and stuff like that. So it's kind of like he has some ways to go. I think Kirkwood is solid.
Oh, I think so too. I think he's really good driver.
I think he's the most solid, right, of that team right now, probably the most reliable. The other two, which I'm struggling with, Herta, right? I don't doubt the talent there at all. He might be just trying to live up to this contract. I think he's trying to live up to he needs a super license and, things like that. And I think that that's problematic. I think Ericsson has much of the same issues in that he's now a paid driver, and that was a big deal last year, and people talked a lot about that. So he's putting pressure on himself to prove he deserved to be a paid driver.
I never thought it was the right move to bring him on, but that's just
no. Leaving Ganassi? Never.
Nope.
Wouldn't have done that.
A good move.
Nope.
I think the other thing, if you look at the other team you mentioned here, when you look at Meyer Shank, I think Felix Rosenqvist has gotten in there and done a great job so far this season.
Yep.
And it's probably one of the most disappointing 500s for him when it comes to that, just because there's been so much momentum on his side. He's done very well.
Yeah.
And to come out of Indy and do what took place there is obviously not great for him. So nothing you can do when the engine goes, right? It's just part of the game.
That's right. I am, at Road America as a fan, with my family, and
you're going back.
Oh yeah. I can't wait. And,
nice.
I think there's another Felix Rosenqvist jersey on the horizon because I'm a fan. I'm a big fan. I like what he does. I like what he's brought to Schenk. I like what he's doing that to. Hey, look, he's the number 1 Andretti driver. Right? Mm-hmm. If you want to consider it that, I would say he's the number 1 Andretti driver right now.
Yeah. Wow.
I don't know. I don't have the standings up to you.
I don't have him up, but I can get him up.
This is compelling podcasting.
I know. Well, we got to
9th. Oh, he's not. So Herta's in 5th and Felix is 9th. Kyle Kirkwood's 12th.
Okay. He's been in the headlines more.
19th. 16th.
Yep.
So
doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, interesting. That's all I got.
Well, it's fun to be back.
It's great to have you back.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here. Hopefully the listeners like it as well.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, it's been good.
Yeah. When we had Boston Consulting Group come in and, do the analysis of our show, Tim, the co-host, wasn't the problem.
There we have it. If you're still listening, you heard it.
The problem was we just don't have enough listeners.
That's a problem. But
it wasn't the co-host. That was the
never
problem.
Shrinking. Yes.
I appreciate you being back. Look forward to doing the next two, as always.
Looking forward to it.
And for the listeners,
you'll be in Detroit, by the way. So
I'll be in Detroit.
Dan's going to be in Detroit working.
Yep.
So look for him if you're down there.
Yeah.
And then we're going to be on, I think, on Monday, right, to put this together.
Yes, that will be the anticipation, and then Road America, and we'll it's going to be a great week. It's going to be back to back, so we'll do that. As always, be sure to engage with us on social media. Make sure you tag us in there. Let us know what you think. We always get wonderful comments on the YouTube, so be sure to check us on the YouTube. And I should say this too. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do, because like I said, we don't know where this is going to go. We're going to put the show on hiatus for now. What it looks like or how it evolves going forward, don't know. We'll figure it out. But one way or another, you could very well see us back. So make sure that you subscribe both on the podcast or on the YouTube channel. I would tell you to subscribe on the YouTube channel because that's the more likely place to find us. And be sure to engage with us there. So until after Detroit, we'll see you then. Thanks for being around.
Good night.